For the agent that must be in the know, Medicare Industry Insider discusses critical insight, noteworthy trends, and upcoming issues in the Medicare market.
Deciphering and debating the legislation, regulation, and what's happening in the market. I'm Chalon Jackson.
And I'm Rachel Brameyer, and we're going to talk shop, dive deep into these complex topics, and make them understandable and actionable.
If you've ever wondered where the world of Medicare is going and how to prepare for the future, Medicare Industry Insider is the resource you've been looking for. Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Medicare Industry Insider with me, Chalon Jackson.
And I'm Rachel Brameyer.
And today we want to talk a little bit about kind of some technological opportunities and concerns within the kind of insurance and healthcare world. And I think what I'd love to start with is kind of the importance of technology, and it's really in society has always played kind of a dual role, both angel and demon, depending on
extreme, but yes.
Yes, extreme, but yes, it really has. It is seen oftentimes as, you know, a savior or a solve to a problem that maybe we haven't been able to impact, and, you know, by others, it is at times seen as, you know, a harbinger of destruction to a way of life, or a, you know, certain
you see that in books,
mechanism.
like you've got like 2001 Space Odyssey taking over the world, and then you also have like beautiful inventions that literally save the world. So
absolutely,
I guess you can look at it like angel and demons.
You really, really can. And I think, you know, it's something that is not new, and not, you know, what we're going to talk a lot today about things like artificial intelligence and algorithmic processing and, you know, genetic information and a lot of other, you know, really, you know, modern technologies. But I don't want people to think that this is exclusive to these types of modern contrivances. You know, we were talking earlier before we started filming about, you know, I read an article at one point in time. It was a quote from an Oxford professor, and this was an Oxford professor some time ago, back in the 1500s, talking about this newfangled paper stuff that all of his students were wanting to write on and take notes. And how were they ever going to learn if they didn't learn with a slate and chalk like he did? And the moral of the story, of course, being people have always been skeptical of technology in one class, and then of course early adopters in another. So definitely not the end of the world in most cases, but there are a lot of concerns and a lot of opportunities. And I think we will talk a little bit to start with about a hot topic in the news and everywhere, ChatGPT.
Yeah. It's actually kind of funny because our own IT person said that your job won't be taken by artificial intelligence. It'll be someone who knows how to use artificial intelligence. So that was his prefaces with ChatGPT and just all the technology out there of like, we just need to know about it and how to use it. Doesn't mean it's going to take your job. If you don't know how to use it, someone who does may take your job. So, but the big thing with ChatGPT that we've been running into is the legality of using it. It's a wonderful resource that came out last year in 2022. It's basically what is it, like Siri, but you can ask it anything. So basically you can hop in there and type for free any question that you have, and it'll generate a response. I've personally used it to help me plan a trip to Paris this last year. I've used it to help write marketing pieces, not marketing pieces, but like things to like jazz up, you know, whatever you want to talk about if I'm putting together an email or something like that. Even thank you notes, if you're just like, I just need another word besides the word thank you and make it look a little bit nicer. But it's a pretty cool technology, but it can also be detrimental as well.
Yeah, and I think there's really right now two big ways people are using ChatGPT. And one way I would like to talk about is as a primary information source, and the other way that I see people using it is as a kind of amalgamator, or a way to summarize things, or, you know, put resources. Because there's two things you can do. You can ask ChatGPT to search its database, and this is one of my big personal concerns, is if you're looking for timely and pertinent information, ChatGPT is not the place to go, because the data set that it uses ends in September of 2021.
Right.
So if you're looking for anything that depends on data or information that is newer than that, ChatGPT is really not going to be able to help you.
So that's kind of funny, because if you Google lawsuits with ChatGPT, recently in the news, there was an attorney who tried to state his entire case based on fake cases that don't exist because ChatGPT not only generated cases, but when he even asked to like cite, additional information to like prove that it was a real case, it did, but it was all
Came up
fake.
with false citations.
It was
correct.
all false. So it doesn't source real things. So even if you ask statistics for anything, it'll give you statistics. But if you ask where is it coming from or where did you reference that, it cannot give it to you. Or if it does,
Not in all cases, yeah.
it gives it to you sometimes wrong. So that has been a huge issue legally. But the other thing is, which I think I'm more concerned with, is if people are putting their own personal health information in there, that now is owned by ChatGPT, which I believe is a Google company. And also that's HIPAA violation. Like you just violated your own health information. Or if an agent's doing it for a client, like that's also a HIPAA violation. So I would say it's a great resource. It's phenomenal for, like I said, writing thank you notes, just coming up with different wording, things like that are just like more generic type things. But I would just be very cautious with what you put in it and what you take as, as real if you are asking for sites or asking for real information. Like it will not give you statistics that are real.
Yep. I think one of the things that I see it used pretty adeptly for is, again, kind of an amalgamator or even like almost like a copy editor. I've seen people feed speeches and presentations into, because that's the thing. Again, you can use ChatGPT as a query tool where it's going to search database of information and provide information back to you based on those queries, or you can use it as a tool to analyze data that you input into the system. So, let's say I have a friend that did this. They were giving a speech. They wrote up their rough draft. They fed it into ChatGPT and said, please provide editing and proofreading on this piece. And it spit out a cleaned up version of the speech that they then, checked to make sure it didn't alter any important details or things like that, just grammatical and punctuation errors and maybe some wording that could be better. So it does have uses for things like that. I know a lot of people are using it to write ads, to write marketing, to write other things like that. But again, big concern with the security and privacy elements of a system like ChatGPT, Bard AI, any of the other AI-based systems that are publicly available out there that are making it really challenging to figure out ways to fully integrate this, as there are things we know it is capable of that we can't do because of the legal ramifications. And I think that's a challenge that a lot of technologies face. There, everything from drugs that aren't yet approved for the, condition they're meant to treat, to now we have technologies that we cannot yet use, even though we know it can perform certain tasks for us.
I mean, it even makes me think of, I think there was stuff in the news recently also about seniors using Siri as their companion because they just needed someone to talk to. So like, I don't know, it's entertaining, to say the least, and maybe it keeps some people company, who knows, but just use it with a grain of salt, and I think it's a neat technology out there that can help if you use it the right way. Another one that we keep running into is AI assistants. I think this kind of falls into the ChatGPT because that assistant is like also inputting a lot of health information potentially. They're alive. If you look it up, you can actually find real AI assistants who can potentially answer the phone or help schedule things out for you or help with questions, things like that. I think the biggest concern that I have is just HIPAA violations and like putting personal health information in.
All about the security of those systems. And, the other big thing is a lot of people throw around the term AI when what they're really talking about is either algorithmic processing or, pre-scheduled like chatbot type tools that have a programmed list of responses to certain trigger words that are not truly an AI type system. And there are some ways that those could be utilized in a safe and secure manner if they're not able to store and process that data beyond the scope of what it's being used for. But I think we'll kind of wrap up with this later, but I think one of the big call outs to agents is look at your insurance coverage as an agent, as an agency. We've got some more stuff, of course, to go over, but that's one thing I want to get out in front of is even if you're not using ChatGPT or some other AI type tool, really time to re-examine as an agent or agency what type of insurance coverage you have for yourself, because E&O just does not cut it anymore. E&O protects you from one very specific set of circumstances where you have made an error or omission in the information you presented to a client. It doesn't cover cybersecurity, data breaches. It does not cover, it doesn't cover general liability. It'll cover you for sure if you make an error or an omission in the completion of an application or something like that. It won't cover you if someone slips on the sidewalk in front of your office. It won't cover you if your sprinkler system goes off and you have to replace your laptop. So that's a little tangential because I primarily wanted to focus on the cybersecurity and data integrity coverages that are available as part of a commercial package policy. But point being, E&O is just not enough in this day and age. If you're any type of agent or agency, especially if you have a physical location where you meet clients, be talking to your commercial friends and getting some good coverage in place.
Very good point. I do see a lot more of our agents who've had either ransomware, cybersecurity breaches. Even the other day, I was friended by a person in our office on Facebook that it was not him. So people even just hacking your social media and like friending you, and then they can if you accept it, potentially get your information other ways. So it is interesting just like being very cautious of the insurance that you do have and make sure that you're up to speed. But you brought up physical offices. We have a lot of people with physical offices who have the ability to work virtually now. And I think we should talk a little bit about that because I think a combination of 2020 being in COVID where people were trying to work from home, and also now the new, I say new, it's not new anymore, but the recordings that you have to do for appointments. I think a combination of all of that caused a lot more people to be more flexible with their job offerings and what they're comfortable with their employees doing. So working from home, or even my sister-in-law works from home and she is a virtual assistant, literally helps schedule everything, takes calls, and does everything at home. So I think it's a really cool option that people have, and you just have to figure out if it's right for you. But as long as personal health information is not being taken in a way that potentially could get stolen. That's why you always have to be careful with insurance. But I think a good option in this day and age is virtual assistants. We've seen a lot of people who will actually it was, and I don't remember the statistics, I'm going to butcher it, so I'm not going to say it, but people are more willing to take a pay cut and work virtually or have flexible hours or be in a flexible environment than make more money and work in a physical office. And that was since post-COVID. So it is something, if you haven't thought about that or haven't thought about some sort of flexibility or virtual options for your office, like technology's out there, it can be done.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, whether it's virtual assistants or, the other technological assistance systems you might need to have virtual employees, I think some of the big concerns with those are, like you said, data integrity, of course, HIPAA compliance and things like that. But another kind of growing concern in the industry, particularly with Medicare and client data in the Medicare space, is offshoring. So
that's a very good point.
Obviously, long been prohibited except in specific circumstances that are disclosed to CMS and to carriers you may work with. If you are using any types of virtual assistants or systems, if any of that data is ever leaving the U.S., that means not just working with a person that is located in another country. That, of course, needs to be disclosed as offshoring. But even if your data is moving to a server that is not in the U.S., that can also be considered offshoring of data and needs to be disclosed. So if you are working with technology companies for certain systems, be it your CRM or your phone system or whatever it is, you need to make sure you understand and are aware of where they hold that data. And if any of it is going offshore, you need to know what security measures they have in place so you can properly disclose that to the carriers and CMS that you work with to make sure you're applying by all laws and rules regarding the offshoring of client data.
That's a really good point. I'm glad you brought that up. Well, you mentioned that I looked like I was going to court, so it's only fitting that I bring up lawsuits now. So I've got my hair up in a clip if you can't see me, and I've got a suit on. So one of the things that we wanted to discuss also was artificial intelligence in the aspect of processing claims. So when we were looking, there was quite a few property and casualty claim lawsuits, but as of recently, this would have been August 27th, I think, Cigna actually got sued over AI-powered claims. So basically what happens is if a doctor inputs something, whatever the case is for that particular medical issue, then the program, the AI, will generate based on that particular situation. This is probably the course of action they should take. Here's how much money the insurance should pay. Here's everything. So it generates kind of your next game plan. Well, if the insurance is looking at that, and maybe the doctor made a mistake, maybe it doesn't account for some of the mental or other emotional issues that might come up from losing a limb or something like that. So it's one of those things that we're going to start seeing a lot more lawsuits because a lot of insurance companies are also utilizing AI to process their claims.
Yep. And again, just to be clear, when we talk AI, in a lot of cases, it may be an actual AI type system. It may just be algorithmic processing software. And, again, a lot of carriers have
admitted, which is what this is.
Exactly. A lot of carriers have admitted to using algorithmic processing in the administration of claims. And one of the biggest concerns that we keep seeing from Congress and from other regulatory agencies is not even claim denials, but also claim decisions being made regarding things like skilled nursing care, where these algorithms are looking at the billing codes that are being submitted for the underlying condition. And the big problem with this is it's an automated system. It's looking at, based on the last 100 claims we paid for this injury, people had an average length of stay that was this long. Let's see if we can match that length of stay. And it doesn't take into account that individual's plan of care, the severity of the injury, the skilled care that they may need going forward, how long it may take that individual person to rehabilitate. It works based on averages and numbers of claims that they have, looked at in the past. So this kind of backward-looking processing actually can cause a lot of unnecessary denials, and we're seeing the same thing in prior authorizations. So a lot of prior authorizations are being denied, over and over and over, and it is actually, right, wrong, or indifferent, saving insurance companies a lot of money.
Yeah, and we were just looking at, there's several lawsuits. We even found some all the way dated back to 2010, where it was an Allstate claim, and basically it came down to the doctor potentially didn't input everything the way they were supposed to, which kicked out a artificial intelligent algorithm that showed what everything should look like in terms of claims and care and all that good stuff, and it wasn't correct. So that person had to go to court and file a lawsuit to get that corrected.
Absolutely.
But I think you're spot on the lack of oversight, and you brought up appeals. We were looking, and according to a Kaiser Family Foundation study, 83% of appeals are reversed and approved and then paid out, which is awesome, but only 11% of prior authorizations are appealed. So I think that's kind of where we go back into, if they're using these algorithmic processes to figure it out and it's not correct, not very many people are actually appealing it.
Well, and I think, like I said, right, wrong, or indifferent, this use of algorithmic claims processing is saving insurers a lot of money, not because it's guiding them to correct decisions. In fact, what we see is 83% of prior authorization denials that were appealed should not have been denied in the first place.
Correct.
They're getting approved. But only 11% of prior authorization denials are being appealed.
Menard's thought process.
As you said, it's
11% rebate.
So, what we're actually seeing here is that 89% of people who are denied prior authorizations are just throwing their hands up and going, "Oh, I guess I'm just going to be sick." So that's 89% of people that aren't even trying to appeal, even though we know 83% of people are successful in that appeal. And I think that's one of the big points of scrutiny that is coming with this automated claims processing. Is it's not that it's making claims more correct or accurate, it's just denying claims that the insurance companies know won't be appealed, so they know they will never have to pay on a lot of these, unfortunately.
I'm sure it saves a lot of time and effort too if automation is is looking at a claim too, because then they're not paying a person to do it. But then there's also no oversight with the person actually looking at it.
Exactly.
So it's a catch-22. I'm sure it's helping them get through claims a lot faster, and maybe you're getting an answer faster, but it might not always be accurate. So just something to be aware of. If your clients do end up in a situation where they were denied a claim, 83% of them get appealed. So it is worth helping them file an appeal if they're willing to go through that. So it is interesting just to see the pros and cons. I mean, as an insurance company, that's awesome. Like, you're getting things done quickly and efficiently, potentially saving a lot of money if that many are denied. As a client, it's awesome. If you are approved, you're getting the answer quickly. Maybe you didn't have to wait for a real person to look at it, but I don't know. You can see the negatives too, that there's that many that got approved after the appeal was done. So the other thing we wanted to look at was genetic profiling with companies. So we've seen a lot of companies like 23andMe, all those ones where you can send in and figure out your genetics, which is phenomenal because now people are connecting to family members they didn't know in the past, finding out maybe medical conditions that they potentially could, at least try to be preventative on maybe. So there's a lot of positives in that, but then there's also the look of genetic profiling. So we were actually looking, and as of today, they cannot discriminate against you if that information is public knowledge to them, that say you're a candidate for cancer or ALS or whatever, disease is major. But what does that mean for the future? That information is now public and it's out there.
Yeah, more or less public. So, most of those companies, 23andMe, Ancestry.com, any of the other services, they're all going to have their own terms and conditions and privacy policies regarding sharing that genetic data. And due to the scrutiny of all of this, most of them will tell you that we will not share your data without your explicit consent. And probably somewhere in those terms and conditions, you gave your explicit consent and didn't realize it. That may or may not be the case. But that doesn't mean that they can't be forced to share that data in certain cases. There's been a number of times where, say, for example, law enforcement agencies have subpoenaed many of these genetic testing companies to get DNA samples or DNA profiles on people suspected of crimes, and in some cases they've been successful.
Murders, yeah.
Yep. So there is the potential to have that genetic information sent out into the world where you will lose control of what is done with that. But again, definitely some protections in place right now to protect against that. And kind of one of the most famous cases that has started over 50 years ago was the case of Henrietta Lacks. And Henrietta Lacks, for anyone who's not familiar, she was a young woman who passed away from cervical cancer, and cells from her body were used to continue to study cervical cancer treatments and things like that, and have progressed to the point where now there is a thing called HeLa cells, derived from the first two letters of her first and last names, that have actually evolved to the point that they're kind of their own species, and they're incredibly popular and useful in the study of different toxins and drugs and hormones. But that's a case where, without consent, medicine took genetic information from a person and then has used it not only without their consent, but to great profit as they have used it to develop new therapies and new treatments and things like that, without compensation to, of course, Henrietta, who passed away, or to her family. So there are a lot of long-term concerns about, we're providing this data to these companies without any compensation on our own part, so they can develop new ways and new things to charge us money for in the future when we do get sick.
Yeah. I think I would have taken a little different direction, but yeah, absolutely. But it is interesting just to think about that this is not a new thing. Like, that was literally a hospital that took cells from someone's body, Henrietta Lacks. And there's a really good book, if you haven't read it. It's called The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks. And I actually picked it up and read it because my husband was required to read it for law school. So, and I was like, that looks like a good book. I want to read it. So I took it and read it too. But essentially, having your DNA used without your consent. I think that's where we're trying to get back to, is just whether it be 23andMe, where you voluntarily gifted this information to them, not really thinking about repercussions because it was huge. I mean, everyone was doing it. Everyone's like, oh my God, I found out this ancestry, or like I found this cousin that I didn't know existed. So there's been a lot of good that's come from it. And even with the Henrietta Lacks, like we've gotten the COVID-19 vaccine came from it, the polio vaccine, they've done radiation and poison studies. They've diagnosed gene studies and figured out the human genome with different cells that she had. But I think it comes back down to like, are people getting compensated the way they should for it? Is there any concern if, down the road, my biggest concern, the reason I didn't ever do it was, what if down the road my future generation, if kids, whatever, what if they are using that to discriminate against them and not insuring them on things? That's weird things. Maybe I'm just paranoid and I'm thinking about that stuff. But I never did it because I was like, what are they going to do with it? And instead of all the cool stuff that people were actually getting out of it. But anyways, technology with gene profiling is definitely can be hugely beneficial in our community and our science, technology, everything, but also like, what are they doing with it? Is it with your consent? And, other people are profiting like they did with Henrietta Lacks that are not the person whose cells those belong to. So,
well, and again, one of the biggest issues with technological advancements of any kind is, we talk about these AI systems that can process data at incredibly rapid speeds and use it in ways that we can't even fathom. One of the biggest problems is these are amoral, not immoral, but amoral systems that have a specific task and complete that task without any of the social or ethical concerns that a human being may have. Right. So we see constantly cases of inherent discrimination in a lot of these systems, not because it is a discriminatory system, but because maybe the data fed into it is unintentionally discriminatory, or that there's ways that data could be misinterpreted based on the parameters set up by the system. So looking at all this data going out into the world, genetic or otherwise, knowing that it may someday be processed by a system that doesn't have a sense of morality or a sense of ethics embedded into it, because at this point in time it can't. It's it's trying to unsqueeze the toothpaste tube. Once it's out there, it's out there.
100%. So for time purposes, we'll move to medical technology, because there is a lot of good with medical technology, and that also comes with, again, putting information out into the world again. So kind of back to where we were going with, it helps a lot, but also can hurt. So one of the big things that we were discussing when we were prepping for this podcast was durable medical equipment, specifically remote patient monitoring.
Sure.
Because it kind of falls back into like the genetic profiling side of, it's incredibly helpful for people who maybe have diabetes or high blood pressure, asthma, anything like that, where it now allows a doctor or primary care physician to monitor you. But now that information's out there.
Yep, absolutely.
So it's, angel and demon right there.
Yeah, so the information's out there, but there are some really fascinating things. Everything from, like we said, things like blood pressure and basic, base level stats like that. But there's also, advancements like, in the diabetic community, specifically, especially with type 1 diabetic, you have things like the Dexcom, these wearable devices that now, continuously monitor glucose levels directly to your phone that can be then shared with your physician, or downloaded to your medical profile. So they do provide more data points. And that's always been the challenge with healthcare. One of the challenges with healthcare is you have point-to-point information. You visit the doctor, they take vitals, they take information, they see you at that exact point in time. Then you go home and your status changes and your doctor's not there.
Right.
And then you go back a couple weeks later, however long later, and they take vitals. Well, now with these monitoring systems, they can get constant and regular updates of your status to figure out if there are trends they need to look at, to figure out if there are, for example, going back to like diabetes monitoring, maybe your blood sugar spikes at certain times of day, and they can start identifying patterns and, what are you doing during those times of day? And again, it's all about pattern recognition, but it's also making things like telehealth and telemedicine much more viable options for the vast majority of people. If you can get a kit in the mail to hook up a pulse ox and a blood pressure cuff and a couple other basic pieces of equipment that most people can figure out, and then use that to augment or supplement a telemedicine visit, it makes that a much more useful tool for clinicians when it comes to providing higher services of care. I even at a conference recently heard from someone who was talking about telemedicine being used for physical therapy, because while that normally seems to us as something that's very hands-on, the vast majority of physical therapy is getting someone in, assessing them, teaching them how to do a number of exercises, and then sending them home to do those exercises. When they come back in, it's really just to say, are you still in pain? Are you still hurting? And then if they say yes, it's probably because you were doing the exercises wrong. Well, now through telemedicine, some remote patient monitoring tools, they can actually look and, using things like AI or algorithmic processing, take videos of their client as they do their exercises and then analyze that data to see, are there ways we can tweak these exercises for better patient outcomes? Are there ways that they need to alter the exercises or other physical therapy elements to make them more effective? Lots of things we can do virtually now that don't require people to leave the home to get care.
It was actually, I'm even thinking about this, it was kind of crazy. It was maybe 7 years ago at a carrier rollout. They were like, wouldn't this be cool if this was the future?
Yeah.
And they showed a video, and it was basically future technology with basically remote patient monitoring. And it had a person who had a wearable watch, I think. And it said their alarm went off and they set up and they had a little which now would be like Google, but I don't know if many people had like a little Google Home or anything at the time. And it said, good morning, here's the weather. Your blood pressure was this. You got this many hours of sleep. You may consider taking these vitamins. And then it said, don't forget we've scheduled, based on your calendar that we have uploaded, we've scheduled your next primary care physician appointment, which is today. It's at this location. By the way, you have this insurance, which provides free transportation. It will be available to pick up. We have scheduled it to pick you up at this time.
Yep.
And so then the person gets on their little, in their car, goes to their appointment, and the doctor then pulls up all this data from their wearable. And then they even said, this was kind of crazy, and who knows, it might be the future, but the toilet even had a device that was monitoring different things in your urine, basically. And the doctor was able to look at that, their wearable, their sleep tracking, like all the different things that were technology in their house that was then reporting to their primary care. And then before they even left their primary care, they'd inputted what they needed, and their home delivery prescription was already on its way to their house. It was just 7 years ago, mind-blowing. But now I'm thinking about some of the things that they were talking about, and I'm sure a lot of that exists. We already use our Apple Watches for everything.
Yep.
It tracks blood pressure. It even alerts people now if their blood pressure is too high and warns them hey, you might need to lay down. I'm sure it even tracks seizures and things like that we 10 years ago would never even thought. So it's helping a lot, but also all that information is out there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And even some of the more out there things, you not built into your toilet yet, but I mean, Cologuard. I mean, I'm sure people have seen ads for that, where you can get a kit sent to your home
Figure
to
if
do
you
a
got colon cancer in your house.
instead of going in for a colonoscopy.
Crazy.
There's a lot of things, but a lot of this is very very speculative. A lot of it is very kind of future thinking of how we can use this technology in a safe and effective way. But I think the key thing for everyone to remember is technology is always going to be there. There's always going to be early adopters. There's always going to be people who push the limits of what technology can or maybe should do.
Right.
And my big takeaway for you as an agent, for you as a member of the industry is, kind of three big things. One, double check that insurance coverage that you have, like I mentioned earlier. Make sure that if you're using technology, or to the extent that you're using technology, you're covering your risk. The other thing is, if you are working with clients, make sure you appeal. It doesn't matter what the denial or negative decision is. We know by the data that appealing is always worth the effort, because there's right now an 83% chance that you're going to get that appeal overturned and get the client the coverage they need. And thirdly, just being cautious of how you're utilizing some of these technologies, Not to say you shouldn't use them. You shouldn't be scared of them. You shouldn't be worried about, them being detrimental to your business to the extent that they are just out there and exist. But you should be weighing the pros and cons, and talking with trusted advisors in your life or mentors to get other perspectives on what some of the risks and rewards of using these technologies are.
Yeah, and I would say the only extra thing I would say as a takeaway, because you had really, really good top three, is that there is a lot of technology out there to help streamline your business. We mentioned using virtual assistants or having a virtual employer, being more flexible. There's also, we've seen huge strides with all the carriers and having chat box options where you can hop into their portal and chat with them instead of getting on the phone. We even have that in our own company. There's a lot of e-applications out there, CRM options, automated marketing things. There's a lot of really neat technology out there to help streamline and enhance your business and help you work more efficiently. But again, back to Chalen's, making sure that you have the right insurance coverage to protect yourself if you're using all of that. But yeah, I mean, technology, I think you hit the nail on the head in the beginning, is very much angel and demon.
Absolutely. It is very much a two-sided coin, and constantly flipping, it seems like. But with that, we'll wrap things up for today. And again, just reach out if you have questions on any of these resources or information that we've shared, and really just look at how are the safe and effective ways you can integrate technology into your business. And as you do that, what resources are you going to have to provide your clients to make sure that they can in turn benefit from those new technologies that are available through the carriers, through their insurance coverage, through you as an agent. So with that, we'll wrap this one up, and we'll be back in a couple weeks with more great information and content for all you insiders out there.